Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this Tuesday afternoon. The Jaybefaunt channel is available on all major podcast platforms, so go ahead and subscribe there. Also part of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays and Thursdays. If you have not already, go ahead and give the stream a quick like. That pushes me out into the algorithm so that I can reach more people to help inform, entertain, and encourage. So thank you very much there. Also, if you guys would like to, you guys can go to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. So thank you so very much there as well. And just a shout out to all the people who are watching. Shout out to all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee. And thank you so very much to everybody joining me today. What will we be talking about today? Well, we have a few stories, and then we also have an interview that we're going to be getting to shortly. We're going to be talking about later in the show, $32.50 per hour for drivers for Uber and Lyft. We're going to be talking about that. That's going to be a really interesting conversation. It's going to be pretty positive. So I want to end this stream on a positive note. And so that's going to be something we're going to be talking about. I am kind of excited for. So stay tuned for that. Our story in the middle of the show is going to be Kingmakers. What just happened in the Supreme Court? And why am I calling them Kingmakers? Why are the presidents in front? We're going to be talking about this. We're going to be talking about immunity. So that's going to be very interesting. But now we're going to be talking to my special guest, Dr. Devon Price, who is the author of Laziness Does Not Exist. As you guys know, I have been reading this book. It has been very cathartic for me, and I am so excited to have Dr. Devon Price joining me this afternoon, introducing Dr. Devon Price. Wonderful to have you on the show.
Hello, James. Hi. Thank you again so much for having me here. Thank you so much for all of the attention and care you've put into talking about the book. Everybody who's been in the chat too and leaving comments and reacting to it and sharing their own kind of take on it. I've been watching as your reading series of the book has been rolling out the last few months, and it just means so much to me. So I'm really thankful to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, I'm a firm believer in giving people their flowers while they're still alive. And I just want to give, publicly a huge thank you to you for writing this book, for you to taking the bandwidth, because I know it's a lot of bandwidth in order to be able to write such a book, because there's not just your thoughts, it's also research that also went into this. You have your notes that are in the book as well, that went into the studies that were discussed in this book. And so I want to thank you for being so deeply involved into opening the eyes. And like I said earlier, to me, it's a love letter to those of us who are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I just want to thank you for writing it. It has been an encouraging book for me to recognize my limitations as a human, but recognize that I am a human, and to honor that too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always really, when you set out as a creative, you never know how things are going to land or if you really met the mark of what you're trying to do. And so it does mean so much to hear when it does reach people on that level. And in the spirit of giving people their flowers while they're here, I do also just want to, before we went live, you and I were just talking together a little bit about just the burden of education and learning and empowering each other to all learn together in a kind of anti-institutional way as leftists. And it's just really important work that you're doing here, making a space for people to talk through these things that is incredibly accessible, both financially and for all of us with disabilities. It's just really meaningful stuff. And I know we can all feel sometimes a sense of doom or that we're not doing enough to bring in the kind of future that we want to see. And stuff like this really matters so much for forming community and empowering people to envision a world not like this capitalist hellscape that we're in. So
you are home here. So thank you so very much. One of my first questions I would like to get into is, because you wrote in the beginning as to why you wrote this book, But how has the process in writing this book helped you even further? If you can get into that just for a little bit.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I interviewed a lot of different types of people in working on this book. I interviewed a lot of burnt out people. I interviewed a lot of therapists and coaches, typically ones who were a little bit, politically or socially aligned with kind of the message of where I was going in the book, but also people who just work generally with overworked and burnt out people. And I think in my writing, I feel like I am constantly still uncovering these stones in my own mind that have these like unwritten rules on them of the kind of person that I think I need to be or what I still need to be doing with my time and my life. So even though I've already had that wake up moment that I talk about in the book of realizing I cannot work 60, 70, 80-hour work weeks, it's not going to happen for me. I still have these little hidden, very powerful self-beliefs that, well, then I still need to do something really amazing and impactful with what hours of the week I do have, right? Or like, oh, I need to be a presence in XYZ number of people's lives in a positive way and really show up for them and not let my needs kind of eclipse theirs. All of these kinds of beliefs that still get in the way of listening to my body, listening to my mind, being more attuned to my reality and my community, all of those things. And I'd say too, the other thing that I learned over the course of writing the book is I got even more radicalized over the course of writing it.
Really?
I thought, oh yeah, I think for me every year I still get more radicalized.
Nice.
Just
Me
as,
too.
yeah, we're on that journey. So just
Yeah.
as a quick example about it, I interviewed one person in the book who for a brief time owned his own restaurant and was really working himself into illness while running that restaurant. And then after the book came out, I heard from somebody who had worked under him at that restaurant. And I heard about all of the horrible things they experienced under that person. And it just really reminded me that, okay, even if I'm really sympathetic to the struggle somebody's going through and seeing them as an example of burnout and overwork, I still have to always keep the power structure at play in mind and remember to look to who has the least power in that situation. And so, looking back at my old work, because I continue to progress, I always look at what I would change and I think, oh, I should have talked to more busboys. I should have talked to more line cooks. What was I thinking? So there's little things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the learning and the growth is ongoing, and the writing does really help with that.
Yeah. As a former line cook, I know exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to culinary school in my last 2 years of high school, and then I went into the industry, and I worked in the industry for about 6 years before I got sick. So I know what it's like to be in that restaurant situation, and there's definitely a hierarchy there that it can be deeply exploitative. So I realize that. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to touch on was in your book here, is the introduction. The first paragraph, when I first read it, it was almost like you're underwater and then that hand lifts you up by your collar and takes you out of the water, and it's like, yeah, you're not going to drown. You're good now. And you said, I have a reputation as a productive person, but that reputation has cost me a lot. To the rest of the world, I've always looked like a put together, organized, diligent little worker bee. For years, I managed to balance professional success, creative output, and activism without letting anybody in my life down. I never turned work in late. If I said I was going to be at an event, I'd be there. If a friend needed help editing a cover letter for a job application, or moral support as they called their congressional representative about the latest human rights horror at the moment, I was available. Behind that veneer of energy and dependability, I was a wreck. I'd spend hours alone in the dark, overstimulated and too tired to even read a book. I resented every person I said yes to, even as I couldn't stop overcommitting to them. I was forever spreading myself too thin, dragging myself from obligation to obligation, thinking my lack of energy made me unforgivably lazy. You spoke to a ton of people. You spoke you're speaking about a ton of people in this country that have been, what's the best way to put it, that have been indoctrinated into thinking that you have to be like a workhorse. And it kind of takes me into the, not to get into the religious aspect, but almost the Judeo-Christian type of mindset of, you work 6 days out of the week and Sundays for church, and it's like, can you tell me like what experiences since writing the book have you met a lot of people who have your same experience that have came to you and talked about that this is me, this paragraph is me?
Yeah. When I was first writing the book and getting it ready for publication, I thought about the people who would take issue with the book, who would argue with its premise. And I assumed it would be a bunch of kind of, if not ideologically conservative, kind of latently conservative people saying, no, there's lazy people out there. Donald Trump's lazy. My husband who doesn't help around the house is lazy. Da 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 da. Instead, what I ended up hearing over and over again was people who would accept the idea of the book, people who were working ridiculously long hours, overextended with so many things, dealing with so many traumas, and they would turn to me and say, but this isn't true for me. Like, I recognize myself here, but I still don't deserve to slow down. I'm still not doing enough. So that's been the thing that I've noticed time and time again in this work, is just how hard it is to get people to internalize that, no, if you see yourself in this is about you. You are doing too much. You, like all the rest of humanity, are a human animal with a body that needs to be taken care of, not a machine, not a cog that can just be plugged into a role and fulfill it forever. And you really do need to listen to that inner voice telling you that you need to rest. So yeah, I do hear from a ton of people who read that introduction of the book and say, yes, oh my gosh, absolutely, I'm extended everywhere, but I can't stop. I don't deserve to stop. There's too much going on that needs my attention. Translating that like recognition into people really feeling some release and relief is it's a struggle. I think it's just that people need to hear it many, many times and really start to build a community that actually accepts them as they are, imperfectly. But oh my gosh, it's such a hurdle for people to get there. And myself too,
Oh my gosh. There is this indoctrination, especially within the West, especially within the United States, where it's like, okay, perfect example. Every single time somebody is interviewed that's successful, and I put that in air quotes, is the people who basically exploited their way to the top, right? Like the great value Lex Luthor, Jeff Bezos, or you have the Elon Musk and people like that. Oh, I love to work and I'm always working. And I want to be like, bullshit. You're not.
No, you're not.
You're not.
No. Elon Musk is playing Elden Ring all the time and stuff. Come on, fighting with people on Twitter.
No, there's no problem. You don't work all the time. And then I'm going to tell you, the people who say, well, I'm always working. No, you're not. Because who's taking care of your kids right now? You got nannies taking care of your kids. That's one part of work that you're not doing. Okay. When it comes to cleaning your house, that's work that we also do that we don't get paid for. That's something you're not doing. Okay. And then on top of it, who's going to the store for your food? You're not going. I don't see you at no Aldi shopping for groceries. I don't see you at Save-A-Lot. So guess what? You're also not doing that work. So a lot of the work that you're doing really isn't really work. You're just exploiting and using other people's labor in order so that you can extract more time away from them for you to live your life and be lazy. So that's just one of my biggest gripes with the people who are like, oh, I'm always working. No, you're not. And then on top of that, if you're always working, then why do you have 2, 3, and 4, or 5 homes? What's the purpose of it?
Yeah, yachts, vacation homes.
Why you need
Private
those
jets.
vacation homes if you're always working?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the math ain't mathing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it all comes down to what gets considered valuable work in this society, and childcare, looking after people when they're sick, educating, youth in an actually empowering way rather than just training them to kind of comply, just being out in your community, talking to people, these things that are just so essential, food, keeping people fed. These are the things that if the government collapses, people will still show up and do, because that's how humans stay alive. And it's because we have like a real human need to do them, that is work. It's not me clocking into some academic meeting with a bunch of people who are making $100K a year, some university administrator, just moving around budget lines. And it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't bring anything into society. And that's, at the level that I see on a university campus, where we give all of our money onto administrators rather than these poor like adjunct instructors who make like $3,000 a class. It's even more amplified again. Yeah. When you look at Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, the work that is valued under the empire is just, just sitting there in your status and lording it over people while the rest of us keep society running.
Absolutely. And now I wanted to ask you this next question. What is one of the biggest issues you notice with people in combating the laziness lie? We're kind of venturing into that arena. What is one of the biggest issues you noticed? Because I know a lot of people, like you said, they deny it themselves. Like they see themselves, but then there's this denial. But then there's many different chapters in the book that, you talk about in regards to how we deal with family. There's many different, and one of my favorite ones was talking about society shoulds. And then you talked about, knowing your worth. What are some of the biggest issues that you see since writing the book?
Yeah, two real barriers for people come to mind. The first one is one we talked about a little bit already, the really internalizing this stuff, giving yourself grace, coming to a point of acceptance, especially as many of us have disabilities that progress, or we just become more disabled as we grow older, reaching a point of accepting that your life is what it is, that you're capable of what you're capable of, and you might never do more. You're probably only going to do less over the course of your life. And can you see your life as having value if you're never productive ever again? That's a really, it's kind of a grief processing in a way, People have to let go of a lot of thoughts that they used to have about what was important in their life and who they were. And almost having thrown that out, develop a whole new value system of how do I want to spend my days? What is meaningful to me? And that is really deep work that people have to really kind of meditate on.
Yeah.
And I'd say the other big barrier people face is maybe they have kind of absorbed the message and they say, okay, I do want to work less. I am going to pull back. There's all the systemic problems that prevent them from doing that. So I might decide I want to do less work at my job, but how do I do that in a way that I'm not going to get fired? And again, a lot of this draws back to community. It isn't just a question of willpower and self-advocacy, right? It's a question of labor power. So a lot of times it goes from, okay, I'm going to be easier on myself in my own mind, but if I actually want to make changes in my life, I'm going to need to get together with my coworkers and we're going to need to start a union at this Starbucks or whatever so that we can actually work at a humane pace. So translating the ideas into in practice action with other people, that's really hard, long work. And so that's where it takes people a lot of time to move through in stages, I think.
Well, that's a really great point, especially when it comes to systemic issues. And one of the things I realized, especially, and this is in the Black community, is that the laziness lie is extremely prolific within our community because the stereotype is, well, Black people are lazy. They don't want to work. And then you got the welfare queens and things like that is tagged on us just because of the color of our skin. And so what did we come up with to combat that? Hustle culture, right? I'm always working, and I got 2, 3, 4 jobs. And we're always trying to combat the white supremacist notion of, oh, black people are lazy. When in reality, we are the furthest from lazy ever, especially given our ancestors and what they were put through, because they work day in and day out for people that were too lazy to actually do the job themselves. But really, it's just a means of exploitation. And so when you go into that, you start to feel like that part of the system, and the system, by it being capitalism, it conditions people in such a way where it's like, no, I need you to be a robot so that I can be a human. And so it's a theft of other people's energy, other people's time, and other people's resources in order to make yourself feel more human, dare I say superhuman, in a way. Is that, am I kind of crazy?
I think you're onto something, because I even think here about how like white people in our culture are afforded more room to be vulnerable, to be soft, to have like a sensitive side, and to talk about how they're working on themselves. All of these things that come from white supremacy saying, okay, we're going to just build this nation on the backs of indigenous and black people, and they need to keep going all the time, no matter what they're feeling. They need to show up to work no matter what. But if you're in the kind of white aristocracy under that economic power structure, then you can work on yourself. You can listen to your feelings. And so, yeah, it's really deeply ingrained and that's where even like a lot of science fiction about like robots and things like that come from. It comes from the history of enslavement and looking at how aspects of humanity were denied enslaved people under our economic system. And we're still doing that to this day. And you see it within every organizational culture. Who's allowed to have emotions? The people at the top. Who's allowed to work at their own schedule? It's the people at the top. And everyone else is supposed to just stifle so much of their humanity.
Yeah. I wrote this, and I just wanted to, I'm making a statement here, and I just want to see if you agree with this perspective. And I think you do, but I just want to put this out there. In my notes, I said, your book lays out the inherent flaws in a capitalist system and how it's unnatural for us as human beings. For example, when European colonial settlers came to claim the land, they noticed areas that seemed unkept, but growing with fruits and vegetables. But in reality, the indigenous planned it in accordance with the natural biodiversity to preserve the land while making it self-sustaining and productive. It would seem as that the indigenous already had the answer to the laziness lies centuries before. Would you agree with that perspective?
I think so. I am a big student of what our indigenous peoples on Turtle Island have to teach us about this land and how to live in a variety of different ways. I was just reading Ruth Dunbar Ortiz's An Indigenous People's History of the United States. Wonderful book. Highly recommend it. And in there, she talks about how exactly what you're speaking about. The European colonizers came by and thought that they saw wilderness. And she says a lot of times what they saw as wilderness was land that for centuries had been maintained by indigenous stewards, but they had already needed to flee because of the encroaching colonization and these settler militias that were killing them. And so it was as if these Europeans stumbled across somebody's garden, somebody's backyard that had been abandoned for a few months or years because of a catastrophe, and said, oh, this is wilderness. No, it wasn't wilderness. It was someone's home that had been very carefully planned and regulated with the three sisters, beans, corn, and pumpkin, squash, that grow so well together and are nutritionally complete and don't, damage the land to all grow together. Like, these things were very carefully thought out and understood. But because they were bringing this European model of we need to have pastures for our sheep or whatever, they completely missed what productivity, if we want to talk about productivity, the land was giving by people who were living with it and of it and saw themselves as children of that land. And we're still living with that legacy today, certainly with climate change and how much it's changing our biosphere here in this country and everywhere else. Even the idea of what it is to be productive comes from this European industrial pattern. And it means we miss so much of the quiet work of maintaining communities, maintaining the earth that people want to do. I think people innately want to do that stuff when they're not alienated by capitalism from that labor.
Yeah, definitely. What do you say to people who retort with the laziness does exist and it's probably because you never found your purpose in life?
I think we have to ask why there are so many people living today who they hate their job if they have one. They can't imagine a job that would make them happy. They find every facet of daily life to be an exhausting slog. If you think that that's a failure of human nature, you're really missing the big picture. Like, what are we doing to people in how we structure our spaces and our lives such that everything is so difficult and done primarily alone? This is not how humans have normally lived. Just as an example, I write a lot about disability. So you look at the struggles of people with ADHD, and people with ADHD get pinned down as lazy, lacking motivation, lacking focus. They wouldn't get anything done if you didn't make them, blah, 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 these awful things. Mm-hmm. But if you look at most ADHDers, what they are is socially motivated. A lot of ADHDers, if there's a pile of laundry that they cannot make themselves fold, if you sit in the room with them and talk to them while they're doing it, that laundry is folded in a second. We need other people to get things done. That's how humans work. We are motivated and enlivened when we feel like we are doing something meaningful, or when we feel like we are around other people who recognize us and have our backs. And so if you look around today and you see an epidemic of laziness, I think you are seeing a real epidemic of demotivation. But it makes sense. It makes sense that people aren't motivated when their labor is so alienated, when they're doing everything alone. We're social animals, and we need to be together doing things that we actually believe in to find that draw,
Absolutely. So I'll save that last question till the end, but I want to get also into this. So there's a couple of passages that I actually want to highlight as well in your book. It's chapter 2, page 49. I want to go over this really quick, and it's in paragraph 3. So it's laziness. So this is in your chapter, Rethinking Laziness, and it's under the subheading, Laziness is a Warning. And this was really strong and powerful for me because I was just like, man, this makes a lot of sense. So you say scientific research on topics such as productivity and burnout have taught us that there are limits to how much work a person can do. Those limits are more extreme than you might realize. For example, the 40-hour work week, which is considered quite reasonable and humane here in the United States, is still probably too long and demanding for most people. We are not machines. Our bodies and minds aren't set up to perform repetitive or mentally taxing work for 8 or more hours per day. Still, many of us push through those limitations, forcing ourselves to work harder and for longer than is truly healthy for us. How many people cursed you out for writing that?
So many managers and CEOs and all of those people writing those Forbes think pieces about how nobody wants to work anymore, people need to return to the office, all that stuff. But the most frustrating part is we have known this. The research has been here since at least the 70s. They have been doing productivity research, industrial organizational psychologists, in warehouses, in offices, in medical facilities, everywhere. And they find over and over again, people get most of their work done in a couple of hours. A lot of people, it's in their first couple of hours of the day. But, everybody's different. Some people, they get all their work done at, 2 a.m. People get that chunk of work done. And then they might try and force themselves or they might be forced by a boss nagging them or pressuring them. They're staring at the computer screen. They're trying to just wring out those last few drops out of that wrung out rag, and it's not going to happen. And yet our whole economic structure is built around, we need to have people in these office buildings because we need to justify our investment in the property, and we need people buying lunches at these businesses. So they need to work a full-time day. They need to be there for 8 hours or more per day. And then that generates so much more value to the economy, because then they have to hire childcare, they have to commute and get their car fixed up and all these things. There's entire industries that just rely on the time waste of dragging people into work when we know actually they don't need to be working and they're not getting any work done. And anything I can do to shout that research off the rooftops until everybody realizes what we're doing is completely untenable and ridiculous, I want to do. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah. And it, like, one of the first things that I learned was when you highlighted this term called cyberloafing, and I was like, oh, because I'll be working and then I'll pick up my phone, start scrolling and looking at Facebook and Twitter or talking to my boyfriend or something like that, and next thing you know, it's like 10-15 minutes past I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be working on doing a show or something like that. And now I need to cyberloaf just for a little bit, because I realized that inherent need to stop and let my brain relax.
Yes.
And so I appreciate that, because I was just like, man, cyberloafing, that's what we do. And I know Savvy Savs, my comrade, she's in the chat because she has her own channel. And I know for a fact that when she's doing her research, she has to stop for a second just to, to scroll through or, talk on something, or maybe even like I have this crossword puzzle game on my phone that I may do. But that's really just a way for your brain to say, all right, 15-minute break, So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, we need that. We need time checking in with other people. Like, so, I mean, there's a lot of negative things to say about social media, but there's nothing wrong. It's very human to have this impulse of, I've been working for an hour. This is a really kind of dry task. I just want to feel connected to somebody that I care about, tell them how my day is doing, share with them some annoying tweet that I saw online, and we can bond over how annoyed we are by this thing. That's just like a fundamental human activity. Even something like just opening up a tab and shopping online a little bit, that means your brain's craving novelty. It wants to look at something interesting and novel. You're like a zoo animal in your enclosure. You need some enrichment, right? You need activities. You need empowerment that comes from playing a game and like completing the task in the game and saying, okay, that's satisfying. Now I can return to this really long task. Yeah. And so we beat ourselves up for it entirely too much. We really need that time.
Yeah, there's another part in that same chapter of Rethinking Laziness, and it's under the advice under laziness helps us be creative. And you say, when we're able to rest and be lazy, we can learn new things about ourselves or have fantastic insights that would never have occurred to us when we are focused on work. Psychologists who study creativity are often very interested in these big aha moments and have put a lot of effort into studying what a person can do to promote them. It turns out that laziness is one of the most effective steps to getting there. Moments of insight and creativity don't come by trying to force them. They require a period of mental inactivity. Good ideas often come to us when we stop trying to come up with them, such as when we're in the shower or in a leisurely walk. While it seems like these ideas have come out of nowhere, the truth is that our minds have become quietly and unconsciously developing them during our downtime. Psychologists call the productive downtime the incubation period. Like an egg that must be kept warm and safe in order to develop into a healthy chick, the creative parts of our minds require safety, rest, and relaxation in order to produce unique ideas on insights. It's almost like a computer program where you have something working in the background, right? But you don't see it working in the foreground, right? Is it kind of like that?
Yeah, that's totally what creative incubation is. You need time where you're not focusing on the problem, because so much of creativity is drawing associations between things you never thought to connect before. And you can't like brute force that by like going through every possible connection of ideas in your mind. Like you can actually trust your own brain to do it. I mean, you're a creative, you write, you have to come up with ideas for these streams, which I know is a tricky task to just constantly be doing. So I'm sure you know this as well, that like it's when you step away from beating yourself up like I need to write something, I need to have this idea, and you're relaxed. I'm sure that's probably when your ideas actually just assert themselves to you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing that I'm really interested in now, for another book that I'm working on right now, is how much feeling safe is really needed for creativity. It's really hard for people to brainstorm when they feel like they're being judged.
Oh, Dr. Price.
Yeah.
So in my brain, part of that is one of the reasons why people go, well, if people are homeless, then why don't they just do what they need to do to get out of being homelessness? Because you're unsafe and you're in fight or flight mode. And so if you're in fight or flight mode, a lot of times these things where you can think in a more logical fashion kind of go out the window because you're so focused on survival that thinking, 5-10 years down the line, it just doesn't occur to you because you're just trying to survive to the next day. And so that's part of that feeling safe in order for you to be able to turn your brain on fully. It just doesn't work that way. And so if we really want people to be more productive, then we also need to facilitate a system where everybody feels safe, and people feel safe when they have structure, meaning permanent housing, food, clean water, all these different things that are required. But the thing is, you cannot do it within the capitalist system because that requires exploitation, and people's brains cannot work well when they're being exploited.
Yeah, that's exactly it. People expect unhoused people to do all of this. In psychology, we call it executive functioning, right? These skills of I'm going to make a plan for when I'm going to apply to jobs. I'm going to keep all my documents organized. I'm going to get a suit, all this stuff. First of all, economically, it makes no sense to expect that from someone who is working with nothing.
True.
But also, exactly to your point, if you don't feel safe, you cannot focus. You can't plan and sequence a series of steps that you want to complete. And also, you have very little reason to feel like you're going to make it through long enough for that to even pay off. Like if you're just worried about somebody taking your stuff or making you move, beating you up while you're sleeping, you're not going to think about even the long term of, oh, how am I going to, get a job that I'm going to show up to for weeks and months. That's just not even on the table for people. And so, and we have a micro version of that with anybody who is overworked and exploited, which is most people under capitalism. People are living just moment to moment, and that makes it, they don't feel safe. It makes it really hard for them to have insight into their own life, their feelings, how to improve their circumstances, how to uplift other people. And that's how they want us, because then we can't envision a different way of building the world. It's the same way that like a cult tactics 101, you don't let people get enough sleep. You don't let them get enough food, because then they're not going to think about leaving you. And that's kind of what we're doing as a whole economic system.
That makes a lot of sense. And then we're going into chapter 3. Chapter 3, just the title alone, it was relaxing for me. It was almost like, okay, I'm not crazy. Your title of chapter 3 is You Deserve to Work Less. And I want to highlight on chapter 3 on page 81. And this is the second paragraph under the subheading, You Can Only Work So Much. Human beings are not robots. When that first sentence right there, I'm like, yes, human beings are not robots. We can't keep churning out consistent results for hours and hours. In fact, we can't maintain consistent output for more than a couple of hours per day, like you just said earlier. People often find this startling to learn, but it is really true. We are not made to work for a full 8 hours per day, despite that being considered the reasonable, humane workday length in much of the world. Though there's a great deal of social pressure and cultural programming that says otherwise, like I was saying earlier in the Black community, being productive and effective at work is not a simple act of will and determination. To do good work, a person has to rest and find moments to enjoy the beauty of life. More hours of work does not equal greater productivity. That's because our attention and willpower have limitations, and quality of work requires time for rest. This makes me think of those people who, and typically it's a lot of the older generation, not all older people, but they'll say, well, if you want to really save money and do better, then get rid of that Netflix subscription, right? Stop getting that coffee, at Starbucks. And then it's like, well, wait a minute. Number one, the money that we spend on a Netflix subscription is negligible. Number two, that time that we're spending watching a couple of movies on Netflix is because we're working so hard that we need time to reset our brains and rest and get away. Mm-hmm. So it kind of feels like that. But if you want to touch on that a little bit about you can only work so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we think of it as if there's some just energy meter that humans have that you can just kind of pour out, when really our ability to focus and do any activity is such a dynamic interplay of what our bodies are doing, what the environment is like in that moment, the nature of the goal we're trying to complete. And we just have no space right now for acceptance, I think, in capitalism. That sometimes something's not going to work out. Sometimes you don't have the energy to complete something, or even sometimes a goal is just not a goal worth having. Mm-hmm. Just as an example, I at a university, even though people have ideas about what a university should be and is supposed to be, but a lot of times the people running it see it as we are selling degree programs. And so if there's a degree program and not enough people are buying what we're selling, not enough people are enrolling, there's this scramble to advertise the program, get more people in the program, make more money. There's never a moment where we just kind of pause institutionally and say, maybe people just don't need this. Maybe people don't want this. Maybe we can just say this was a failure and just let it happen, right? There's very little room for failure or learning lessons. Just saying, oh, this didn't work. We're not going to grow forever. We're not going to turn a profit forever. Capitalism by its nature seems unable to accept loss, taking the L when you need to take the L, reevaluating, and also just listening to your body and saying, oh no, I can't do this. I do need to say no to something, because as much as I value all of these things that are on my plate, I can't do all of them. And I'm not a bad person for just noticing what's already true. That's the thing. This stuff is already true, whether you acknowledge it or not. You have a limit. You can't be doing everything. Mm-hmm. If you're overextended, there are certain things that are not getting your best attention that might be the things that you really want to put your best attention into, whether it's your kids or, activism, whatever it is. There's only so much energy that you have, and you really cannot yell at yourself to make yourself have more energy. That's just never going to work.
Yeah. And, speaking of energy, in chapter 4, it's entitled Your Achievements Are Not Your Worth. And you go over some of the things. One of the things that I actually appreciate was how to reframe your life's value. And then you talk about these things like learning to savor. You actually made an example of if you're watching TV, or if you're, working while you're eating, you actually don't get a chance to really savor what you're having, to really enjoy what you're having. So I liken it to, I had some bomb ass soup today before this stream. I had some great chicken noodle soup, but I was working and doing stuff while eating my chicken noodle soup. But really, I should have went to the table, sat down, and enjoyed my soup. Mm-hmm. But I didn't, because I was so focused on trying to make sure that things got done. When in reality, taking the time to actually savor, which is something that we should be doing as humans, we don't do as much anymore. It's more, we just eat to just keep our bodies going so that we can continue to be productive,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're so dissociated from the world and our bodies. It's like we're not living in full color. We're like living in black and white.
Yes.
Because we're just, and I struggle with this too, even though I care about this stuff and I try to improve it. I have to really notice myself. Oh, I'm supposed to be taking a walk right now and enjoying this beautiful Lake Michigan that I live by. and I'm thinking about an email that I need to write, or maybe I'm pausing on the trail and writing the email. Why am I doing this? Or even something like documenting it. Why am I doing that? Am I trying to look like I did something productive because I made content for the internet or whatever? Like, there's always this wall between us and the experience. And it has to be a really conscious choice to say, no, I am going to actually just like, I'm going to touch this tree and feel the bark and remember where I actually am. You know what I mean? And savor the soup and all of these things. Even something like the cyber loafing example that you gave before, I could be mad at myself for pausing for my work to text a friend or a loved one or a partner. Or I could say, no, I need this. And this is like the stuff of life, connecting with people we love. Why can't I just like appreciate this moment of connection and things like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then learning to savor and then make time for awe. That was great because that made me think of grab a blanket, put it on the grass, and look at the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
Just do that. Or if it's at night and you can see stars, look at the stars. Just chill, and just look at, because we live on a beautiful planet. Take time to look at your planet. Or if there's a parade, go ahead and take time to look at parade. And the funny part is we're so busy at shows and parades going like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
look with your eyes, not at the screen.
Anyway,
yeah. Absolutely.
And then you go over, do something you're bad at. It's great because it's like, it doesn't, like, even if you suck at it, keep doing it. You'll improve eventually. And it's just like, there's this guy, he teaches calisthenics. And he said, the goal isn't to be an expert in one day. It's the consistency of it. You may only be able to do, you may, instead of being able to do pull-ups, you may only be able to hang on to the handlebars for 5-10 seconds. That's okay. Try for 15 seconds next time. Try for 20 seconds next time. And then as you progress and keep it consistent, you'll get better. But it's okay to suck, right? That's something I learned. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's okay to suck. Not everything we do needs to be something that is a value add. There's so much value to frivolity, to being silly, to doing something that has no other purpose other than doing the thing felt good or taught you something new or just gave you another different view of reality, a different peek into another aspect of the world. I think sometimes we lose the skill of how to learn, like learning itself is a skill. Being bad at something is a skill. Like it takes a lot of presence and humility to just do something that's uncomfortable. And that's really important for us.
Yeah. Like me starting on this channel.
Was it a struggle at first? Because all your overlays look so nice now and everything.
It took a lot of lessons. And look, my homie Savvy, she will tell you, I learned a lot from her. And so, I there's a lot of content that I took off the channel in way in the past, because it was just like, dude, what were you thinking? That's what I was saying to myself.
I do some Twitch streaming. We should have you on the show also, I should say.
Cool.
And some of the early videos, I didn't understand how anything worked. Like my video was so choppy. Like the chat was like in a weird place where nobody could read it, but like I learned so many technical skills from just doing it. If I had waited until I had the setup perfect before I started going live, I never would have done it. I don't know if you're the same way, but I had to build the ship. And my producer, Maddie, who's way better at the technical side of things, we had to really build the ship as we were flying it, and that's fine. Like that's how you learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally get that. Chapter 5 is titled, You Don't Have to Be an Expert in Everything. I suffered, especially in the first beginnings of me in this space, whether I was doing RBN, well, we used to be Fred Hampton Leftist before we changed name to RBN. I suffered from imposter syndrome like crazy in the beginning because I was surrounded, and I'm still surrounded by brilliant people. And I felt like everybody knows so much more than me. And why am I in this space? Like, why did you guys pick me? And so feeling like I had to be an expert in everything, it really hit, because it's like you don't. And this is something I tell, especially to women, because unfortunately, a lot of us men, we tend to have like ego. And so we don't have to be an expert in everything. We'll just, fake it till we make it. But I notice with a lot of women, and by women, I'm talking about cis women. A lot of times they'll feel like, well, they have like 90% of the facts on a subject, but that 20% will prevent them from coming on camera to talk about it. And I'm like, why? You have 80% of the facts. You know more than that dude that only has like 20, 30% of the facts. But a lot of times we end up downing ourselves because we don't know everything, down to the most minute detail,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the powers that be, the existing power structure really benefits when we censor ourselves, or when we create accidentally or on purpose a culture of you can't speak at all as you're still figuring things out. And yeah, you see it all the time, women being silenced and spoken over. I mean, it happens to trans women too, even within the trans community. Trans men talk over trans women and say, no, we're the authority on the experience in our realm as trans people, and tell trans women, like, you can't speak up or you're being too aggressive. Like the same things that happen also to Black people in the workplace, for example, of just don't use that tone, whatever. The censoring. There's so many marginalized groups of people who, the less power that you have in society, the more people tell you to just shut up and to doubt yourself. Unfortunately, it is those people who have the most insight into how these systems work, and so much to contribute. And yeah, we just all get, whether we're disabled, whether we're trans, whether we're queer, everything. The more layers of that you have, the more ways that you've been silenced. And it skews all of the conversations that we're having and that we don't get to have because those people aren't heard. Yeah.
Oh, yes. That facts. Like the young kids say, facts, especially. There's another point that I wanted to point to that I also wanted to get to. Chapter 6, and your relationship should not leave you exhausted. Page 164. You talked about page 164. Say no to small things. You said it takes time to retrain a person and adjust their expectations. It also takes time to train ourselves to stop reflexively saying yes to so much. Kathy finds it often most effective to begin with small refusals, particularly ones that won't blow up into a huge conflict. Start by saying no to small things, she says, because those are easier and the consequences are less. Start to notice when the demanding person asks for something small, like getting a ride to the airport, and just start to say no to some of those things. As somebody who it was very difficult for me saying no throughout my life, no is the hardest 2-letter word for me to ever say. And this suggestion here is to start small with small requests and say no really helps, because then you start to realize your own power in that way, and so I just, thank you for that one.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that one up. Just yesterday was on a podcast that's for sexual violence survivors, and the host, Katie Costner, she was talking about that exact same piece of advice. And she said that actually has a term in a lot of survival recovery spaces of basically just being an aspect of helping people develop agency again. Like if you have people who are victims, survivors of sexual violence, they feel really unempowered. And so just learning to say no to just little things Like, can you turn that radio down? I really don't want to hear any music right now. Like, no, I don't want to talk about this. Just little rejections help people develop a sense of being in control of themselves again. And again, if you've been marginalized, if you've been spoken over or tone policed all your life because of your identities or your position in capitalism, you really have to develop that sense of, no, I actually can assert my point of view in the world. And I don't need to exist for other people all of the time. Like, that happens. I certainly hear this from a lot of my Black comrades, that people think that they just exist to meet other people's needs and even resolve other people's conflicts for them. There's just this labor taken out of you that people feel entitled to, and attention all the time. And just being able to say no to that. And at first you will, I think most people feel distress. You feel bad saying no. So you say no to something small. You ride out that guilt and realize the world did not end. I'm not a bad person. I needed to do that. And then you're better positioned to say no to bigger things in the future. And it's a slow process, but I think that is a really good place to start.
Yeah. It's powerful. It's powerful to assist people into realizing their own autonomy and exercising their own autonomy. Because a lot of times when that's taken away from you over and over, you start to get used to it, and then you start to give your autonomy over because you expect it to happen. You know?
Yeah.
And then it's like you feel like if you don't give it over, then there's something wrong with you, when in reality it's not something wrong with you, it's something wrong with the system.
Yeah.
You know? So yeah, trying not to get teary-eyed here, but you know, but it really, yeah.
And it's part of building a future world too, you know, like we have been so conditioned to comply under capitalism, and to think that we need a president, to think we need the cops, to think we need a boss.
Yeah.
And if we want to overthrow that power structure in some way, we all have to get more confident in our own strength as people to decide what's best for us, that we actually don't need those authorities over us. And that we can trust our neighbors too, you know, that we can trust other people, that they don't need the cops looking over them and controlling them either, or a boss or a president, whatever. Yeah. And so it starts really small, but I think it is so crucial to building any kind of leftist movement, is people being empowered and feeling capable and knowing that we can take care of ourselves and each other and our communities. And that we have a lot more power than we realize, a lot more strength than we realize.
Yeah. And just a couple more things on shrugging off society shoulds. Under the subheading, page 192, it says your life can be messy. It says another damaging should the laziness lie promotes is the idea that our lives should look a certain way. The competitive nature of capitalism leaves many of us feeling that we have to attain a certain kind of lifestyle, one that impresses other people and signals our wealth and success. This is yet another trap and another needless source of stress. The phrase "keeping up with the Joneses" comes from the title of a comic strip by author Pop Moment, and published first in 1913 in the New York World. And then it talks about the McGinnis family and the keeping up with the Joneses and the pressures to maintain this classy, presentable lifestyle to impress people around them. And it's like you feel like if your lawn doesn't look a certain way, right? Like, for instance, and bringing this back to race again, the way our hair grows out of our scalp is sometimes seen as distracting. And it's like, well, this is how it grows out. And so society shoulds is based on a system that wants to keep us within a box, whereas that's not how humanity is. That's not how humanity is. And so just if you wanted to comment on that, I appreciate that part too.
Yeah, I think it just fosters, again, even more compliance, right? I'm reminded again in your comment of just parallels between misogyny and anti-blackness here. And when you look at misogynoir, it runs even deeper. Women are told that they need to put all of this meticulous effort into their appearance in order to be allowed to exist in public life. Black people are told that they need to do all kinds of things to their hair, to their presentation, to erase aspects of their culture and how people talk in their culture in order to be professional or to be, again, able to participate in public life. And when you're investing that much mental energy and money and time into your presentation, that is time that is not yours. It's time that keeps you feeling self-conscious if anything's out of place, that makes you worry about how people see you and how they're evaluating your status. And it extends to other things too. Like, I need to have this fancy car. I need to have this kind of lifestyle that affects everyone, but it falls the most heavily on people who are marginalized in these structures of power. And, we're both disabled. I think it also comes down, a lot of disabled people feel a lot of shame if we have a messy house or we have to wear pajama pants to the Zoom meeting. These things that we have to do to just manage our pain and exhaustion.
Yeah.
And that can keep us out of the game. Then it keeps us from sharing our perspective. And so it really reinforces the
Dr. Price, why you got to call me out with the pajama pants?
Because I have been there.
I ain't standing up right now. But I have one more question, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
And this is one of my more deeper questions I would like to ask of you, as somebody that's on the left like myself. What do you think is the best systemic solution to combating the laziness lie?
Oh, gosh. At the time that I wrote the book, I had certain ideas in mind, and I mentioned some of them in the book, things like universal basic income and things like that. But as I mentioned, as time goes on, I get more and more radical. And I think especially just what's been the genocide is just another further radicalizing moment of losing faith in the existing systems that we have. So I don't want to cop out and say, dismantle capitalism, no more US government, but that kind of is what I think at this point. It would be nice. Yes, we can try. But I do think we are kind of in a moment now where something has changed in the air. It's become a lot more normal for more people to talk about this entire system. We can have no faith in it. And the people who are engaging with this system right now and thinking about, third-party candidates, local elections, I don't want to pass any judgment against that, because anything that gets more people housed and fed in the immediate term is beautiful. And that means we have more comrades who are there and can carry on and live to fight for a better world. So I don't want to discount any of those things, but it all goes back to settler colonialism. It really does. And I think the answers for how to take care of people, regardless of their ability level, regardless of their age, for us to derive wisdom from our elders without having one elder be pumped full of drugs and be carted around as the symbol of America the way we have now. The models for how to live were here on this land, and indigenous peoples on other continents. There are other ways of living. And it feels like a little bit of a cop out to say, but I think we are, many of us, realizing that we can live a different way, a really radically different way. And there is no reforming a nation state that has done this much evil and continues to. And I think what happens next from that realization is up to each of us. And, the choices we can make, again, to help keep people housed and fed and as strong as they can be, to get to that hereafter,
That was a heavy question, and you definitely lived, bro. Thank you so very much. Dr. Price, can I have you back on to talk about news stories and things like that, just to cover a topic or two in the future?
Yes, that would be my pleasure. Absolutely.
Definitely. And just to let people know, like, where can they find you? What do you have coming up next too?
Yeah. So I have a book coming out next year. I've already written one book about autism, and it's kind of a follow up. So that'll be coming out in March. And I just post writing for free really regularly on my Substack, which is just drdevonprice.substack.com. So the piece that just came out yesterday was a piece on harm reduction and suicide. How do you support people who are feeling suicidal in this moment and uplift their autonomy without calling the cops on them? So that's what I've been working on lately. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Price. It is an honor and a privilege to have you on. And I just want to thank you once again for this book. This book has meant a lot to me. It's literally one of my favorite books. And I recommend it to wherever I can, especially those of us who are workers. And I wish you all the success and, peace and liberation that we all deserve. And I can't wait to have more conversations with you in the near future.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for having me on, James, and everybody for being here for this conversation. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Yep. Thank you so very much, sir. All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So that was Dr. Devon Price. Wow. I'm geeking out here. So that was great. I really appreciate his perspective, especially throughout the book, and just centering it on who we are as human beings and how can we adapt ourselves. Not adapt, that's the wrong word. It's how can we get out of this adaptation in this system that tries to turn us into robots? How can we humanize ourselves in our own minds once again? And I think that it is extremely important for us to do. And not only will it focus, we focus on humanizing ourselves. Well, once we start to humanize ourselves and realize our own limitations, then we start to do it to other people too. So then we don't start looking at other people and go, oh, you're just lazy. We start to go, man, maybe that person mentally and emotionally needs to rest. We start to give each other permission for that in our own minds. And then we start to give people grace and allowance for that. And that's one of the things I appreciate. So if you guys have not, I highly encourage you to pick up Dr. Devon Price's book, Laziness Does Not Exist. And if you guys would like to listen to me read and discuss it, you guys can go into playlist on the channel and go ahead and go there. If you guys would like to read it on your own, you guys can either get an audio book, you guys can get it in physical copies, and just read it on your own if you like. I highly recommend either way you guys would like to do it. Just go ahead and do it. This book will be cathartic, and it will impress upon you the need to slow down, because you live in a system that does not want you to slow down. So thanks to Dr. Price for coming on. Just to let you guys know, if you guys have not already, please make sure to give the stream a like. Appreciate it very much. And before we get into the rest of the stream, I would love to give shout outs to patrons. So we're going to do that really quick, and then we'll get into the chat as well. So we're going to do that right now. So going to give a shout out to the patrons on Patreon. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this type of work. You guys make this work possible. You guys literally keep the lights on. So thank you to patrons, and here are the tiers. We have Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrades, Solidarity, and JB members. And want to give a huge shout out to new patrons, Rebel Seer and Bunny Town. Thank you so very much to all of you for becoming patrons on Patreon. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to go to the chat. I'm going to check out the Rumble chat really quick. Looks like we're good on the Rumble side. All right. Let's go to the Rockfin chat. All right. We got people watching on Rockfin, but they're a little bit quiet. That's okay there too. Now let's go into the chat. All right. So first off, we have Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, everyone. Good to see you, Jacqueline. We have Talia says, hi, Talia. We have Eric Gray coming in saying, hey, everyone. PT coming in saying, keep up the great work. I absolutely love this book. Right? Oh, man. Great to see you, PT. Nice to have you in the chat. My comrade, sister from another mister, Sabby Sabs coming in saying, awesome. Good to see you in the chat, Sabs. All right. Jacqueline says, just had a message. All being well and fingers crossed, I'm going to be a grandmother again. Woohoo! Congratulations, Jacqueline. Oh, that's going to be awesome. You fall in love again. I am so excited for you. Miguel coming in saying, peace, good to see you. Eric Gray coming in the chat saying, it's especially disingenuous when as teachers, we are called lazy. Yes. And the thing is like some of the people who produce for the future are teachers. And I think that's important. I think anybody that's in the teaching profession should also read this book too, because I think it will be good for them as well. But yeah, thank you. Jacqueline says, isn't it funny how cultural media like Star Trek affords more humane traits to robots and cyborgs than real life people did to black and brown people? Jacqueline, ooh, you touching on something? Yes, thank you so very much. PT says, it is nice to know some people believe human life is valuable no matter how productive you are. And it's funny because a lot of times we will assign immense value to a baby, a newborn baby that does not produce. And yet we assign to it the highest value of human life. Not a 30-year-old male that produces, because the thing is like we will assign a baby the highest value, even though a baby doesn't produce. Now, I will say in a capitalist system, babies are given higher value because of their potential production value. Whereas people like anti-capitalists like myself give them higher value because they're a new life. But I think all life is precious. No matter if it's a baby's life or a person that's elderly, all life is precious, right? But I find it interesting, right? You know, we should just value all life equally as precious, no matter if you produce or not. Bryce Smith coming in saying, morning, JB, happy belated birthday. Thank you. Sup, everyone. Good to see you in the chat, Bryce. Jacqueline says, socially valuable labor such as care work, nursing, etc., doesn't seem to be as valued in the society as productive labor, including motherhood and stay-at-home dads. That's also productive labor that does not get valued. If you're a stay-at-home parent or a parent that's, and a lot of times, let's be real, if you're a mother, you do not get that. Your value it's praised, but never materially. It's never materially compensated, which I honestly think it should be. I think you should get the praise and materially be compensated. And I think that it should not always just fall on just mothers. I think fathers should do equally the same amount of work in order to share and make it more equitable and equal. You know, we have here Luz coming in saying, chime into the chat here is how I do that. Thank you so very much. Sweary Fairy coming in saying, hyper arousal is not the problem. It's not a problem solving state. And you're speaking about, you know, being in that fight or flight mode, which I agree. And so this is why we have to, in order to really help people be the best version of themselves, you have to give them some stability. Part of that is making sure that everybody has housing. Housing is a human right. How do you get rid of homelessness? You give people housing. It's just that easy. People are like, well, you make it sound so simple, because it is. It is. But people want to feel better than other people, so therefore they don't want to give it, because it's like, well, you didn't work hard for it. And it's like, I want to call me old-fashioned, but I want to go back to the days where we had a gift economy, where, let's say I'm starting off as a young man in my family, and the neighborhood comes together and builds me a house. Now, of course, I'm helping in the building, but they come together, build me a house. And then when my neighbor needs something, I got them next. And then we just give, and it keeps giving. And we have a gift economy. That was how the indigenous, both American indigenous and African indigenous, that's how they operated. And so I want to go back to that. To me, those were the good old days. So then you're not going to be in a hyper arousal or fight or flight mode. You're stable. So therefore you can think 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line and then work towards that. Thank you very much, Sweary Fairy. Eric Gray says, oh, I forgot to ask this question. What does Dr. Price think of anarcho-syndicalism? I'm sorry, I forgot. Yeah. We only had about an hour, though. Game.film, friend to the channel, says, JB, fam, good to see you, Game. Jacqueline says, it's like worrying about the chores during sex. And I can't ever have been the only one. Don't you get me in trouble, Jacqueline. Don't you get me in trouble. All right, let's go to the next one. There's another one. Oh yeah. Jen McMahon says, yep, about to say Keeping Up with the Joneses, or another one, the grass is always greener on the other side. Yep, absolutely. Thank you so very much for that as well. Off the Chain Atheist says, this has been a great stream. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. That was quite a compliment. Let me see. La Senora Chamanik says, I unsubbed from Jimmy Dore after his Blair White interview, and I'm convinced now he's anti-gay. Look, I said what I needed to say about him. And there's a reason why he hasn't been on this channel in a long time. That's all I'm going to say. Roger Meadow says, don't forget to reach out to Cynthia, JB. I think I already have a planned date for her. So yeah, I think I already have a planned date for her. But thanks for the reminder, Roger. Let me see. Off the Chain Atheist. Why no super chat option? I'm going to tell you why. Because my channel is demonetized. So if anybody would like to support the channel, you can support it via Patreon or PayPal. So yes, my channel has been demonetized since October of last year. So yes, just let everybody know. Yeah, I forgot to put that up, but yes, I am demonetized. And then let me see. And good to see you, Anisha. The PayPal link is in the description if you would like to. I keep it in the description as well. All right. Oh, Anisha says, hello, everyone. What a great interview. On my winter holidays as a teacher, but still working, planning classes, the interview encouraged me to actually stop for lunch. Great. I'm glad. I hope you get to taste and savor your food while you're on lunch. So thank you. I am Chamanik. It's pronounced Chamanik. Okay, thank you so much. My apologies if I said it incorrectly. Now, let's go to the next story. We're going to get into that. So I want to talk about kingmakers. The Supreme Court made a landmark decision yesterday involving the powers of the presidency, and you need to know about it. So we're going to go into this right now. And a lot of people are focused on Donald Trump, but I think this is bigger than Trump. Let's get into this. It's a doozy, y'all.
So we're going to get out of that commercial break because we have word that the Supreme Court has issued a ruling on the extent of presidential immunity from criminal prosecution for conduct alleged to involve official acts during the tenure of President Trump. This is the big one we've been waiting for. It's consequential. It's really interesting that the Supreme Court in 248 years of our history has never actually ruled on this. So it is big and sweeping. And I have our political panel looking over this right now. Andy McCarthy, Chief Justice John Roberts has the writing on this. He's got the pen. Is that significant?
It's very significant. It's the most important case of the term in terms of the long-term interests of the executive branch, in terms of the short-term interests of Donald Trump. And it looks like, at least within the bounds of clear executive authority, what Chief Justice Roberts is saying is that the president clearly has immunity from prosecution. So the question is going to be, again, I think Trey underscored this before, is what is an official act? There's going to be a lot of litigation about that, and what's close to the core of clear executive constitutional authority versus the outer ambit of it.
Brett?
Do we have Shannon? Is she going through the paperwork? Shannon, you there?
Yes. Yes, I am here. If you can hear me, let me read you a little bit of what we have from the court. It does find this: under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. He is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts. That's the first blush we've got on this. It looks like a 6-3 split. We've got the dissent by Justice Sotomayor.
So, meaning whatever he does or she does, whatever president does, because a lot of people are going into, oh my God, this is going to be horrible because if President Trump becomes president again. I'm thinking, because everybody's focused on Trump, I'm thinking, well, if this is the case, then what about all of the war crimes that were done by Clinton, by Bush, by Obama, by Trump, and by Biden? What about all of those war crimes that they committed? Now they're all immune because they were president? That means that they could literally carry out murders because they were president? The crimes that WikiLeaks via Julian Assange had uncovered, those war crimes, you mean to tell me that men like this are immune from them? You mean to tell me that? This is what's wrong with this country. And you can tag this to Trump all you want, but here's the thing. Biden still got 6 more months in office, meaning that he can do whatever the hell he wants for the next 6 months. And nobody can hold them into account for it as long as it's, official office of the president activity. Which means he can't be held accountable. Just like there's qualified immunity for police officers, I guess there's qualified immunity for presidents. Oh boy. Let's continue.
We've got the dissent by Justice Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson join that. There is a kind of split decision on some of these. Somebody joins in one part, not in another part, but that's the overall holding of the court. So what it means now, we'll have to dig into this and see if they tell us now, how do you decide an official act versus an unofficial act? Because that's going to be critical, having now said the president does have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. We'll dig in, see how they define those official acts, and look for a little bit more from you from the opinion. But at first blush, this looks like it is going to be a win for the argument for presidential immunity when it comes to allegations of criminal activity.
What's interesting is that, I'm sure if you're the Biden White House, you're paying close attention to this as well, because in the situation that we find ourselves in the utilization of the justices in politics. Let me go to you, Jonathan Turley, for a reaction to this decision so far.
Well, this is along the lines of what many of us anticipated, that the court did not go with absolute immunity on everything, but did say that there's absolute immunity when it comes to core constitutional powers. We're still going through the opinion to see if there's any assistance on where that line is to be drawn. This case is going to have to go back to the district court, which is going to have to try to sort of thread this needle to determine what in the case would not fall under these protections. But this is obviously a win for President Trump in the sense that the special counsel was arguing, as with the lower court, that there was very little immunity here to be concerned with. The counsel for the government was assuring the court that they really didn't have much to be concerned with here in terms of any changes in the status of the case. That's clearly not what won the day. The court here is saying that we do need lines here drawn to protect presidents so they have some breathing room. And you have to sort of wonder how the context affected the justices. I mean, if they want to look at the implications of leaving presidents without protection, they just need to look around the country. Even though Manhattan was not a federal case, it was a political prosecution in the view of many of us that was rather raw and open. And so this is a context that must have concentrated the minds of these justices as they did what Justice Gorsuch said and tried to write for the ages, to have something not for this case, but for future cases and future presidents.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
All right, so that's the overall gist of what's going on in regards to presidential powers being immune when it comes to official presidential activity. Let's get into the nuts and bolts of this as well. It says U.S. Supreme Court rules Trump has immunity for official, not private acts. This came out yesterday. It says the U.S. Supreme Court found on Monday that Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for any actions that were within his constitutional powers as president, but can for private acts, in a landmark ruling recognizing for the first time any form of presidential immunity from prosecution. I want to say this again. If they can apply this to Trump, that means they can apply this to any other president, including former presidents. Remember, Trump is a former president. So therefore, if he cannot be prosecuted for any of the official things that he's done, including war crimes, that means it cannot be done to Obama. It cannot be done to Trump, to Bush. It cannot be done to Clinton. Hell, it can't be done to Carter. So with that being said, when it comes to actually indicting them for war crimes, for which I'd argue every single one of them have done, according to the United States Supreme Court, they're immune from it. So therefore, when it comes to them, as long as it's official presidential business, the rule of law does not apply. This goes beyond Trump. And a lot of liberals are going to be fear-mongering about Trump. And my thing is, what about the last 6 months of Biden? Because Biden, for all intents and purposes, moves and behaves just like Trump. There is really not much difference. What about the murder of Anwar al-Awlaki? I hope I didn't butcher his name, but U.S. citizen, and murdered his 16-year-old son, who was also a United States citizen? That's what Obama did. And he can't be held liable for that because it's official business of the president? You got to remember something. The president is the commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces, meaning that if the president approves of and orders a war crime, therefore he or she cannot be held criminally liable for what they do. Meaning, if another Hiroshima or Nagasaki happens, the president can't be held liable. Yes, am I going that extreme? Yes. Is it hyperbolic? No, because we did it before. But they can't be held liable because they're immune. The funding of a genocide, they cannot be held liable because now they're immune. This is why we talk about getting rid of this capitalist system. Let's continue. It says the justices in the 6-3 ruling authored by Chief Justice John Roberts threw out a lower court's decision that had rejected Trump's claim of immunity from federal criminal charges involving his efforts to undo the 2020 election loss to Joe Biden. The 6 conservative justices were in the majority, while its 3 liberal members dissented. Trump is a Republican candidate challenging Biden, a Democrat, in the November 5th U.S. election in 2020 rematch. The Supreme Court's slow handling of the case, coupled with its decision to return key questions about the scope of Trump's immunity to lower courts to resolve, make it improbable that he will be tried on the election subversion charges brought by special counsel Jack Smith charges before the election. We conclude that under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power requires that a former president have some immunity from criminal prosecution for official acts during his tenure in office. That was from Justice Roberts. Immunity for former presidents is absolute with respect to their core constitutional powers, Roberts wrote, and a former president has at least a presumptive immunity for acts within the outer perimeter of his official responsibility, meaning that prosecutors face a high legal bar to overcome that presumption. Roberts cited the need for presidents to execute the duties of his office fearlessly and fairly without threat of prosecution. Here's my thing. Shouldn't the president be held to a higher standard? Am I crazy for that? Shouldn't you be held to even more stricter standards than the average person? Because you literally hold the life of thousands, if not millions of people in your hands. And by the people, I'm not just talking about our service members. I'm also talking about people in other countries. You literally have the nuclear codes. You literally hold the world in your hand. Surely you should be held to a higher standard. But no, the Supreme Court said, you got it all, baby. It's all on you. As long as it's done within the official office of the president, you're good. As for the president's unofficial acts, Roberts said there is no immunity. Trump hailed the court ruling in a social media post, writing, "Big win for our Constitution and democracy, proud to be an American." The court analyzed 4 categories of conduct contained in Trump's indictment. They are his discussion with U.S. Justice Department officials following the election, his alleged pressure on then Vice President Mike Pence to block congressional certification of Biden's win, his alleged role in assembling fake pro-Trump electors to be used in the certification process, and his conduct related to the 1/6/2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol by his supporters. The outcome gave Trump much of what he sought, but stopped short of allowing absolute immunity for all official acts, as his lawyers always advocated. Instead, the court specified that actions within the president's exclusive sphere of constitutional authority enjoy such a shield, while those taken outside of his exclusive powers are only presumptively immune. The court found Trump was absolutely immune for conversations with Justice Department officials. Trump is also presumptively immune regarding his interactions with Pence. It decided, but returned that and the 2 other categories to lower courts to determine whether Trump has immunity. The ruling marked the first time since the nation's 18th century founding that the Supreme Court has declared that former presidents may be shielded from criminal charges in any instance. The court's conservative majority includes 3 justices Trump appointed. The court decided the case on the last day of his term. Says Trump, who is 78, is the first former U.S. president to be criminally prosecuted, as well as the first former president convicted of a crime. Smith's election subversion charges embody one of the 4 criminal cases Trump has faced. This says, president is now a king. So here's what Justice Sonia Sotomayor said. She was joined by Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson. Delivered sharply worded dissent, saying the ruling effectively creates a law-free zone around the president. Quote, when he uses his official powers in any way, under the majority's reasoning, he now will be insulated from criminal prosecution. Under the Navy SEAL team's orders, the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival, immune. Orders a military coup to hold on to power, immune. Takes a bribe to exchange for a pardon, immune, immune, immune. Sotomayor wrote. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Here's the problem. It's not just limited to Trump. See, everybody's fear-mongering about Trump. I'm talking about all the former presidents, the current president, whoever wins in November, whether it be Biden, Trump, or third party, whoever, and then down the line from there. You see, the issue is nobody should have that much power. Nobody. And yet, here we are. And ultimately, what this means is that the parasite class wants their guy or girl, whoever they want in office, to have as much power over their subordinates, the people, as they can to keep them in line. Ultimately, that's what it is. Because they're sick and tired of us becoming uppity and jumping into the streets and demanding our First Amendment rights, our Fourth Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights. They're tired of it. They don't want us to be as uppity as we have been. In 2020, when we were doing the George Floyd protests, we were uppity. They didn't like that. Now, because of a genocide that's going on in Gaza, we're becoming uppity again. They don't like that. So therefore, they're like, we got to give these guys more power. Give them more power. And that powers was determined by who? A group of 9 people who are not elected by us at all, that serve lifetime appointments. That is who just gave the president powers of immunity to do whatever the hell they want. Remember Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith? Remember what Mace Windu said? I'm saying this about the corporate dictators, the parasite class. They have control of the Senate and the courts. They're too dangerous to be left alive. Who has control of the courts? It's not you. It's not me. And people will say, well, we voted for president and that president chose the person who's going to be in Supreme Court. No, we do not choose the president. Because if we actually chose the president, for instance, those of us that were voting in the Democratic Party back in 2020, it would have been Bernie Sanders that would be president right now. But he's not. Because Joe Biden wasn't elected. He was selected, not by us, but by the parasite class. In 2016, Donald Trump wasn't elected. He was selected by the parasite class. Same thing with Barack Obama. Same thing with George W. Bush. Who got George W. Bush into office? Because it was neck and neck. And guess what? Ultimately, who was the deciding factor? Because I'm not going to say much more. But we were supposed to have a President Al Gore. But the Supreme Court judged otherwise. And so now, where are we at? We're at now the Supreme Court giving powers, undue powers, to a president. And making them immune to whatever official acts that they do. So guess what people like Bush and Clinton and Obama, guess what they're doing? They're, thank God. Because they are now immune. They can't be held liable for the war crimes they committed. Let me finish up. UCLA School of Law, Professor Rick Hasson a critic of Trump's efforts to, I'm going to be careful with saying that, says the Supreme Court has put out a fact-intensive test on the boundaries of the president's immunity, with a huge thumb on the scale favoring the president's immunity in a way that will surely push this case past the election. Sorting out the court's opinions and how it applies is going to take a while. That's from University of Law professor Erica Hashimoto. No chance of a pre-election trial. So this is huge. This is huge, man. And here's the point. Not since its landmark Bush v. Gore decision, which handed the disputed 2000 U.S. election to Republican George W. Bush over a Democrat Al Gore, has the Supreme Court played such an integral role in the presidential race. Says if Trump regains the presidency, he could try to force an end to the prosecution or potentially pardon himself for any federal crimes. Rules for thee, but not for me. Sift through all that all that fear mongering about, oh my God, Trump. Because the thing is that Trump and Biden, because we actually are in the middle of a second Trump presidency right now. It's just under a different face. So now, right now we're in 2024, but who becomes the next president in 2028, 2032, 2036, 2040? They will have the power to do whatever they want, as long as it's within the office of the president, as long as it's within the official powers of the president, without any type of accountability. This is why this system has to change. And by change, I mean the system needs to be changed fundamentally from the foundation on up. This is why we organize. This is why we are mobilizing. This is why it is absolutely necessary to build dual power. You got to remember, the fascists got their ideas from the United States. The United States is the blueprint. And it will always revert back to its original state, which is steeped in genocide, steeped in subjugation. This is why it must be changed fundamentally from the ground up. If not, we're all doomed. Get organized, people. Get organized. All right, so go ahead and give the stream a like. Thank you so very much for that. Let's get into the chat. All right, so let me see. Lou says, I need to read the full text of the ruling. It may simply be he can't be sued for doing this job. And I don't trust mainstream media BS to not spin it. Yeah. Swear Fairy said Barry got scared. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Jen says it's so effed up, the hypocrisy of it all. Sweary Fairy says, so who are we scared won't give up the power, though. But the thing is that ultimately, the power rests in really the parasite class. The president is really just a middle manager. He's just a middle manager of the system. Bryce says, if Trump goes down, if Trump becomes president again, I would mean everyone is fair game for everyone in positions of office, including Supreme Court peeps. That's probably why they ruled this way. Jacqueline says, from the sound of it, Joe Biden has become a little too comfortable being first lady. Jen says, SCOTUS is the worst branch of our government. I say they need to be pruned. Eric T. Red says, the way a president is held to account is via impeachment removal by Congress. I honestly think that it should be more than that. I think honestly, presidents should be held by a higher standard, not lower. They're doing it the way they do police, which goes to show that in this system, you know, they're okay with people failing upward as long as it's for the parasite class. Fail upward, and that's okay. You know, and it sucks because the thing is like the only people that give that ability to fail upward are the people who are holding up the system of exploitation. Those of us who are exploited, we can't fail upward. If we fail upward, we die. Collage Mirage says, backwards world, the USA is a crap hole of corruption. Eric says, prosecuting presidents in this way leads us down a very problematic, dangerous path. Let's see, off the chain atheist says, Project 2025 has me truly frightened for the future of America for the very first time in my life. I'm not going to try to minimize it, but Black people have been going through Project 2025 for the last 400 years. It's nothing new to us. Fascism is a Tuesday for us. Where do the fascists get their ideas from? Here. That's where they got their ideas from. Fascism is a funny thing because fascism, what it does is that fascism is like it's almost like a bungee cord. We will try to pull and pull and pull and pull and pull as far away from it as we can. But if that cord's still there, go right back. You see, fascism is quoted as just capitalism turned inward. So what it looks for now is, okay, well, they pulled away as this far. The only way to bring them back is to force it back, which means forcing back what we've done in the past in our original state, which was chattel slavery and genocide. A lot of our protections are being cut left and right. A lot of protections that we forced upon the system, especially with the Communist Party of the United States, and giving us protections as workers, is being pulled back by fascist elements that have existed for at least 100 years in this country. Well, no, they've always existed in this country, but they're pulling it back now. And they're using their middle managers being the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch to do their bidding, to claw it back, bring it all back. And so Project 2025 really is just them doing what they've always wanted to do. And it's no different, because the thing is like there's a good cop, bad cop when it comes to the Democratic Party. But yeah, honestly, there's two roads that we're going to meet. There's a fork in the road. You have two diverging directions. You're either going to have one, fascism, or the second side is going to be socialism. There's not any in between. Liberals are going to tell you, oh, there's going to be a third one. Nope. That's not how it goes. Conservatives are going to be like, no, there's a third direction. Nope. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's going to be one of the two ways. Either the corporate parasites direction and where they want you to go, or it's going to be what the workers want to go. It's going to be one of the two ways. There's no in between. Which one you choose is up to you. One, the fascist way, all you have to do is inaction. And by inaction, I'm not just talking about not voting. Voting is easy, right? I'm talking about actually organizing and getting out there. That's what I'm talking about. Not doing that inaction, all right, just let it happen. But to push for a worker-centered egalitarian system, well, then that's going to mean organizing in action. So yeah. But I do see your fear. And it is definitely scary, but it's not something that we can't win against. And it's in combating against it is not going to mean voting for the others, the more friendlier side of fascism, which is the Democratic Party. It's good cop, bad cop. It's like get away from the cops, period. Savvy Sab says this will become political. That's a dangerous part about this. Yep. Roger Meadows says we must not put it permanently in our minds. The Supreme Court is a supreme Congress, can overrule any decision imposed by the courts simply by issuing an amendment to the U.S. Constitution of the United States. That is also true. Eric T. Red says we need to translate our dissatisfaction into clear demands. Yes, those demands must be carried out through organization, and that organization must be. If you do not carry out those demands, then there are consequences to that inaction. Savvy Sav says, JB, this is going to set a bad precedent. SCOTUS will make it political. Yep. Christian says imperialism turned inward. Yep. All right. So Same. All right, so let me go to the next subject that I want to get into. Sabs, I know you're in the chat. I heard about this story before you showed it to me, but at the same time, when you saw it, I was like, yes, she saw it too. So let's get into the next story right now. Oh my goodness, $32.50 per hour for drivers. What? Oh my gosh. Let's get into it. Say it ain't so, I will not go. Turn the lights off, carry me. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Oh my goodness, this is actually some pretty promising news out of Massachusetts. Let's get into this story about Uber and Lyft drivers able to make $32.50 per hour now. Let's get into this. I am quite excited for this story. Let's share this article here. So it says Uber and Lyft agreed to pay drivers $32.50 per hour in Massachusetts settlement. So it says here, drivers for Uber and Lyft will earn a minimum pay standard of $32.50 per hour under a settlement announced Thursday by Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell, and a deal that also includes a suite of benefits and protections. The two companies will also be required to pay a combined $175 million to the state to resolve allegations that the companies violated Massachusetts wage and hour laws, a substantial majority of which will be distributed to current and former drivers. Campbell said the settlement resolves her office's years-long litigation against the two companies and stops the threat of their attempted to rewrite state employment law by the proposed 2024 ballot initiative. That question would have resulted in drivers receiving inadequate protections and an earning state standard that would not guarantee minimum wage. She said, quote, for years, these companies have underpaid their drivers and denied them basic benefits, end quote. She said today's agreement holds Uber and Lyft accountable and provides the drivers for the very first time in Massachusetts guaranteed minimum pay, paid sick leave, occupational accident insurance, and healthcare stipends. So I think, I think that this is a promising story. I will not claim absolute victory over this because I think more can be done for workers, especially for these drivers of rideshare companies. But I do think it's a step in the right direction, especially for workers, because they need to be able to have a living wage so that they can be able to afford to make enough money to feed and house and clothe their families. And so these companies, these corporations are really in the extracting game, extracting as much from their drivers as they possibly can to keep their shareholders happy. When in reality, it is the workers that make this company run. If these drivers were to delete the apps and stop driving overall, where would Uber and Lyft be? No, well, right? And so that's why I think this is important. And they know this too. Let's continue. So it says Democratic Governor Maura Healey said this settlement delivers historic wages and benefits to right the wrongs of the past and ensure drivers are paid fairly going forward. In a statement, Lyft said that the agreement involves a lawsuit that recently went to trial and avoids the need for the ballot initiative campaign this November. It says, more importantly, it is a major victory in a multi-year campaign by Bay State drivers to secure their rights to remain independent while gaining access to new benefits. Uber also released a statement calling the agreement an example of what independent, flexible work with dignity should look like in the 21st century. Now, here's why I say it's a step in the right direction. Because if Uber is praising it, I'm scratching my head. I'm like, what you so happy about? See, this is why I think Uber drivers should still be cautious because they're still considered independent contractors. So I this is why I say take it with a grain of salt, because they still aren't getting what I believe that workers should get. Now, I'll show you guys why in a second. So, this says the companies were pushing a ballot question that would classify drivers as independent contractors eligible for some benefits. But Campbell said the settlement stops at the threat of ballot question. A competing ballot question seeks to give drivers the right to unionize in Massachusetts. Drivers will now earn 1 hour sick pay for every 30 hours worked, up to a maximum of 40 hours per year. That's basically a week's worth of sick pay. I'm gonna be honest with you. I honestly don't think that's enough. To me, sick pay should be at least 80 hours. Because when you're sick, for those of us who are grown people, a week, you're just getting through half of it. I think you should at least have 2 weeks, at least. Right? 40 hours? No, that's not enough. I think it should be 80 at the very least. So I'm not satisfied with that. I'm gonna be real with you. Let's continue. It says, as part of the agreement, Uber and Lyft must update their driver applications so drivers are able to view and claim their sick leave directly on the app. Drivers will also receive a stipend to buy into the state's paid family and medical leave program. Under the deal, Uber and Lyft will also allow drivers to pool together their hours driving for the two companies to obtain access to health insurance stipend. Anyone who drives for more than 15 hours per week for either or both companies will be able to earn health insurance stipend to pay for plan on Massachusetts Health Connector. Here's another thing. As somebody that believes that we should have a nationalized healthcare system, I think that no amount of hours you should be able to work, you should have healthcare no matter how many hours you work. I don't care if it's under 15 hours. You should have healthcare. It should not be, oh, well, you have to work this minimum amount of hours in order to receive. No. Our healthcare should not be tied to our jobs. This is why I said it's in the right direction. It says drivers will be eligible for occupational accident insurance paid by the companies for up to $1 million in coverage for work-related injuries. The agreement also requires the companies to provide drivers with key information about the length of trip, the destination, and expected earnings before they are expected to accept a ride. I mean, that's like duh. That should have been there in the first place. As the companies are barred from discriminating against drivers based on race, religion, national origins, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, or other protected identities, and can't retaliate against drivers who have filed a complaint about the companies with the Attorney General's office. That's also a duh position. The deal also requires companies to provide drivers in-app chat support with a live person in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French, and must provide drivers with information about why they have been deactivated and create an appeals process. So I think, that is all good. I think they can go further. I think it should go further. And I'm going to show you guys why. So in Massachusetts, that $32.50 per hour is actually not good enough to survive in Massachusetts. Why? And the out of reach from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, Massachusetts is actually the second most expensive state in the United States, according to the 2024 out of reach map. You have to make at least $44.84 an hour required to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. So if you go into more info, it actually shows that the state minimum wage in Massachusetts is $15 an hour, which is wholly inadequate. But you need to make $44.84 an hour, almost $45 an hour, which is 3 times the minimum wage in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. You have to work 98 hours to afford a modest 1-bedroom apartment at $15 an hour. Nobody has time for that. And so while the $32.50 an hour is a step in the right direction, it is wholly inadequate for anybody to still live. Because you will still need a second job in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Massachusetts. So while I say it's a step in the right direction, it has not benefited the drivers adequately, in my honest opinion. Now, this is also me advocating for why don't we have a better public transit system for people to get around? Because also, it's going to be more expensive to go via Uber and Lyft. Because, of course, who's going to absorb that cost to get around on Uber and Lyft in Massachusetts? The company's not going to absorb that. It's going to be passed on to you, the consumer. Even though the shareholders, they could receive a little less. The CEOs, they could receive a little less, but they're not going to do that. So they're going to pass that on to you. And this is why I think public transportation really needs to be taken out of private hands and put into the hands of the public. This is why we need more mass public transit. This needs to happen in places like here in Florida. It is wholly inadequate. Here in Orlando, our public buses will stop running at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, maybe at the most. Meanwhile, you got places here that are open 24 hours. Some of these people aren't leaving the bars and clubs who work there, the bartenders, the restaurant workers, the line cooks and all that. We're not leaving out until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning to take public transportation to get home. And then we have to spend extra money to take an Uber or a Lyft, which is becoming just as expensive as taking a taxi. And let's look at the most expensive areas, right? Now, the average supplemental security income for people who are maybe disabled is $1,057. That's ridiculous. Trying to look for the most expensive areas. Oh, you know what? I can probably look at that through what Roger sent me. Hang on. I know Roger sent me he sent me the screenshots for that. Hang on. All right, so let's go here. Okay. So let me share this here to show the most expensive areas as well. Thanks a lot for this, Roger. So the most expensive areas are Boston, Cambridge, Quincy. So you need to make $54.37 an hour. So if you're living in Boston, you're screwed. Even if you're an Uber driver making $32.50 an hour, you're still screwed. Nantucket, you need to make $48.58. Easton, Raynham is $48.08. Dukes County is $41.46. And Barnstable Town is $40.04 an hour. Still wholly inadequate in the state. So this is why I say it's a step in the right direction, but it just doesn't go far enough. This is why I reflect on people like our viewer Roger Meadows says, we need a ride. If we're going to have rideshare companies, then it needs to be worker owned and operated. And this means that you can either try to start one or, for instance, right of first refusal, have a law like that that's established so that the workers actually have the ability to purchase the company and become worker owners. If, say, Uber or Lyft decided to sell the company, of course, it is public. I think it's publicly traded. So, but yes. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think this is why I call it a promising story. Is it a big victory? I'm kind of on the fence about if it's a big victory, So that's why, I'm pretty much, on the fence on it. Let me take a look at this here too. So let me share this with you guys, because ultimately I don't think they would ever want to sell because, of course, it's a lot of money. So this is from Uber. This is their stock ownership. Top institutional holders. Well, look at there. Vanguard owns 8.2%. BlackRock owns 6.69%. Morgan Stanley, State Street, another big one. So, of course, these companies are owned by the private equity and these big companies that really own a piece of everything. So, yeah. This is why it is important to wrestle these type of companies out of the hands of, these are the people who actually own our country. They own our government. It's not necessarily the president. It's not Congress. It's not the Supreme Court. There are people who own them. And these people, as well as the big banks and the central banks, are the ones that own our government. They have our government by the throat. It's the same thing with Lyft. Lyft is no different. Let's go to Lyft. Here's the stock ownership, top institutional holders. Number 2 is Vanguard. Then you have BlackRock. State Street's also in this. So there's really not much of a difference. They own both. So this is why it is important to do what we can to change the system. Because, yeah, they'll give the drivers an inch, but then they'll take that inch back. So never be satisfied until the workers actually own it. I'm happy for the workers that they're able to get a little bit more, but there's a lot more work to do. So keep fighting and go ahead and unionize, but try to work for worker ownership over that. So yeah. Like the stream. Thank you so very much to everybody. Let's go to the chat. All right. Jim McMahon says, that sounds good, but how much is the cost of gas in Massachusetts? Great question. I'm imagining that is probably no more than probably what, 4 gallons, maybe 4 1/4. Sabby and Eric are in the chat. They may be able to tell you that, but I'm imagining it's probably no more than 4 1/4. If it's higher than that, yikes. Jacqueline asks, what if drivers can't get the fares because people can't afford to get Uber or Lyft? Your guess is as good as mine. Jen says gas prices are under $3 a gallon in Massachusetts. Okay, I mean, that's good. Oh, thank you very much, Off the Chain Atheist. That's okay. You know, I appreciate just even, you know, your kind words. Thank you so very much. Colin says that's trash sick pay. Eric says the corporation says oh no, Eric. Oh no. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah. There should be there should not be a cap on sick pay, on sick hours. That's also true. Yeah, I agree. Dark Charisma says, hey, have you reacted to the SCOTUS stuff yet? That was my last segment I just did. So yeah. Hey, I haven't had somebody watch on Twitch in a while. Nice to have you. Yeah. Eric's in Massachusetts. The Uber Lyft settlement is typical Massachusetts. Better than most places, but not near good enough. Yes, it's like they get you right there, and it's like, could you go a little further? And they're like, nah, we're not going further. Oh, thank you for the map, JB. Looking at the site now. Let me put it in the chat for everybody. I'm sorry, I forgot to put it in the chat. You probably found it just by Googling it, but I'm gonna make it easy for everybody so that you guys have access to that out of reach as well. So you guys have that too. So there you go. Just want to make sure you guys have that. Jen says making $32.59 an hour and then realizing you must get a second job because you can't live a life or care for yourself or your family. That's nuts. Ain't it? It is crazy. Kalimba said, well, damn, 2 hours. Every Tuesday at 2, baby. Every Tuesday at 2. Yep, definitely. Know your enemy. Know your enemy. Do not let your enemy set the terms. You set the terms. Lou says, I knew those two dumb punks on the Vanguard were shady. wrong for that, Luz. You wrong for that. Oh my Lord, look. Oh. Oh. I'm not gonna say anything regarding that. I'm not. Nope, nothing from me. All right, so let's continue on. I kid. Roger says, sounds like that pulling of that 9-inch knife out of you by 6 inches Malcolm told us about, or pushing you from 10 foot underwater to only 3 feet from under the surface. Yes. Okay. Eric says gas here is about 350. Okay. I was a little bit higher in my mind than it was, but all right. It's a little bit more than here in Florida. Here in Florida, I think we're at like 3.25 or 3.30 per gallon right now. So yeah. And yes, I do think that public transportation should be free at the point of service. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Oh, we got to charge people out of pocket. No, we don't. Because here's the problem. And the money it takes to collect the fares, because that costs money, and the time it takes to collect the fares, you can actually save more money and just not charge any fare at the point of service. And then on top of it, if somebody evades the fare, you got to pay the police to intervene and arrest that person, which costs more money to pay the police than it does to just let the person evade the fare. So you might as well make fares obsolete. You might as well just make public transportation fare free. And that exists. That even exists here in Orlando when you have limo, LYMMO, that goes around the city. You have the orange line, the lemon line, the lime line, and the grapefruit line. And those actually operate without you having to pay a dime at all. So if they could do that here in Orlando, and then we could expand that to the entire Lynx bus system. We can expand that to the Sunrail. We can expand that. Like, why don't we own Brightline as a state? Why is it privately owned? Brightline should not be privately owned. It should be public. I'm sorry, but these Floridians, I'm telling you, they're crazy. Because why are we paying all this money to be able to go to Tampa? It should be cheaper. I don't want to pay $70 for a ticket just to ride to Tampa. That's crazy. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry for going off, y'all, but Lou says the bus is free in my city. Network isn't perfect, but it could be worse too. See? And they can actually tax the rich more. Like, my thing is like these people, honestly, they steal the wealth, so therefore the wealth should be taken from them. But my thing is like we can actually tax them more in the interim in order to make sure that everybody has their transportation free at the point of service. Why not? You shouldn't have to work. Look, imagine, I remember days where I would literally have to take, hold up. Let me show y'all something. I'm going to show you something. Hang on. Here. Got it. I remember digging through this, right? I remember digging through this when I didn't have enough money to jump on the bus to try to find as much as I could in quarters, then dimes, then nickels to get on. And if I didn't, I would have to get up as many pennies as I could. I remember trying to get on the bus. This wasn't that long ago. And then once I started with the pennies, the bus driver was like, stop, just get on. Because I didn't have enough money to get the bus to go where I needed to go. And the fare is $2. $2. This is how we're doing now. This is how we're doing right now. And when people who are in what I like to call the legacy left, bread tube, will talk about, well, the economy is doing good under Biden. GDP is up. The job numbers, the job rate is the unemployment numbers are low. That don't mean crap. What the heck are you talking about? We're still having to scrape together coins just to be able to get on the bus, to be able to get to where we need to go because we don't have the money to do it. And the fare is $2, 8 quarters. That's all you need. But the thing is that we don't got it. We're having to go to second harvest food. Lord, y'all about to make me. Hang on. Let me get this. Let me get this paper because they gave this to us as patients. Let me see if I have this. No. Hold up. This is it. Yeah. We got stuff like this. We get stuff like this for Second Harvest Food Bank. We're not okay. We're not. And when people think, oh, well, the economy's doing all right. For who? Boo? For who? It's not doing good for you. It's not doing good for me. So when people want to talk about, oh, well, the economy is great, they're talking about the corporate leeches. That's who they're talking about. They're not talking about us. And so when people like Dr. Devon Price talks about working less and saying yes to yourself, Dr. Devon Price also realizes that you can only do so much in this capitalist system because let's say you do want to say yes to yourself and you do want to pull back from working so much. You can do that, but you'll be homeless. So what then? That's why the system needs to change. That's why me and Dr. Price were talking in agreement. Yes, the system needs to change fundamentally. So, man, I'm telling you, man, we got a lot of work to do, but it can be done. But yeah, thank you very much for that, Luz. Jacqueline says, is that $2 per journey or is that for a day saver? That's every time you get on a bus. I mean, except for transfers. Transfers are free, but that's per time you have to take the bus to get to a specific destination. So you have to pay, like, let's say, for instance, I have to get to my sister-in-law's house, right? So, or if I have to go to my brother's house, I would have to jump on the bus, pay $2. I might have to take a couple buses, so I probably have to transfer, which is free. But then by the time I get to my brother's place, which will probably take me about a good 2 hours just to get there, what would take me 10 to 15 minutes to get there by car would take me 2 hours to get there by bus. And then by the time I get there and do what I need to do, I have to go home. I have to pay another $2 to get on the bus to come back and spend another 2 hours just to get to where I need to go. So that's the bus system here in Orlando. And then if you want to get, let's say, an all-day pass, well, you have to pay a few more extra dollars for that. If you want to get a week pass, you have to pay for that. If you want to pay a month pass, you have to pay for that. Now, they do have passes for people who are disabled like myself, but you have to go to the bus station in order to be able to get it. which means you have to pay regular fare to get down there. Then you have to show your ID and your Medicare card in order to be able to get that pass, so that you can pay a discounted fare. So it's a lot, and a lot of us just don't have it. So that's why I talk about what we go through as people who are low income. Because everybody wants to talk about the middle class, but nobody ever wants to talk about the poor. Nobody ever wants to talk about the working poor. We always get left out. This is why I'm here. Because somebody has to be a voice for us. Somebody has to amplify our voice. And even some people on the left don't do it. Even some people on the left have a little bit too much elitism. And they'll only listen to people who make a certain amount of money, or only pay attention to academics. They don't actually get out there on the ground and talk to people. This is why some people on the left really need to start getting out there on the ground and actually talking to people on the ground. Those of us who are working poor. Because we can talk about theory all day long, but are we actually talking to people who are actually suffering in this system? To humanize them, our fellow workers, and not just talk about it from an abstract perspective. Jacqueline says, so it's not just free public transport that is needed, but more efficient public transport. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Joe Anthony says, JB is right. If capitalism is to function better, you got to enforce some basic rules, hold everyone accountable. But what are the chances? No chance. No chances. All right. So I'm going to head on out. But I just want to thank you guys for tuning in today. This was a wonderful show. I really appreciate it. Dr. Devon Price was a awesome guest. I cannot wait to have him back on. It was a pleasure. It was a privilege. And so it was neat. I'll say that. I haven't said that word in a long time. So, of course, as you guys know, I do readings on my channel. So I'll be continuing in the readings. So the next book I'll be reading this week, we'll be getting back into Prejudicial by Margaret Kimberly. So I'll be getting into that. And of course, I just read, if you guys have not watched Monday evening, I did another reading of The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love. Just as an FYI, that reading I did is sensitive for some viewers. So viewer discretion advised for that reading. Just letting you guys know before you guys go in there, it is a very deep and intense subject. Okay. So, but yes, I did that reading. Also, I'll continue in the reading of The Water in the Spirit by Melodoma Patrice. So we will be continuing in that reading as well later this week. And I'm trying to see what else do I have. Hang on. Who do I have coming up next week? I have to look at my calendar. Sorry. So I have next Tuesday scheduled Cynthia Brown from the Ohio Coalition to End Qualified Immunity on next week, next Tuesday. So yes, Roger, I set that up already. So yes, be sure to tune in where I have Miss Cynthia Brown back on. That's going to be a great conversation. You're going to have an update. So thank you so very much for that. Stay tuned for the Savvy and JB show this Thursday. We're going to have an expert on all things Africa. We talk about what's going on in Africa, and I cannot wait for that conversation as well. And yeah, so I will be making these clips, and then I'll get them out to you guys as soon as possible. And yeah. Oh, by the way, I hope you guys enjoy, because I typically after my stream, I'll put in chapters for the streams, so that if in case you guys just want to jump to a particular segment, you guys don't have to try to search through. So I try to make sure I get that done as soon as humanly possible. So just let me know how you guys feel about it in the comments, after the stream ends. But yeah, I try to do that, to make it more user friendly for more quality of life for you guys as viewers too. So thank you very much for that. Thank you so much to all the patrons on Patreon and Coffee, as well as anybody that sends me any type of mutual aid through PayPal. You guys make this a whole lot easier on me. So thank you so very much. Like I always say, water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. Cyberloaf, because your brain needs a reset and you need to relax yourself. And I love you all for watching. Mwah! Forehead kisses. And you guys mean the world to me. I mean that from the top and bottom of my heart. You guys have yourself a good one. And remember, laziness does not exist. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.